Welcome to our first Thacher Gallery event of the fall semester. It's great to have you all here. My name is Father Tom Lucas. I'm a professor of art and architecture and also the director of the gallery. And on behalf of Lori Simmons, our associate director, we're really happy to have you here for a very special event for us, an event that speaks to our local tradition here as San Francisco's oldest university, which we're very proud of. Having Tom Killion, who is a local artist born in Mill Valley, and someone whose work is internationally recognized as fusing together the best elements of kind of the vernacular California style of art and the Japanese tradition of printmaking. Tom has graciously loaned us about 35 of his very finest prints for this exhibit. Out of more than 400 prints that he's done over his lifetime, we have really the cream of the crop, and we're delighted to have them here at the university. Tom is an academic, but he's an academic who forsook the classroom for his work in the studio, and we're all richer for that. He's been making prints since 1975. As you might see when you go through the exhibit, a very painstaking process of observation, of not just looking at nature, but seeing nature in a very kind of meditative process, and then bringing the results of that research back and working it through a tremendously complex process of drawing and redrawing and cutting blocks and hand inking the blocks to come up with a spectacular product that we all enjoy so much. Tom has taught he studied history at UC Santa Cruz, received a PhD in African history at Stanford, but it's really our pleasure to welcome him here to the university tonight. Tonight he's going to speak, the title of his talk is Topofilia, the California landscape in Japanese-style woodcut prints, and he's going to show us work from across his career to trace his development as a landscape artist in illustrating his techniques, from his very early monochrome prints into the very sophisticated work that you've seen tonight. So join me in welcoming him, and thanks all for
Thanks so much, Tom. I don't know how he came across it, but somehow Tom discovered my work a year or two ago and came out to my studio, and this is all his idea, and I'm very grateful to have seen my work hung in such a beautiful way by Tom and the students who worked on the exhibition, and I'm really honored and grateful to have it here at USF in the Thacher Gallery. So I'm wondering if someone can turn the lights off, because we're going to do a slideshow and it'll look a lot better if there's no lights. And I always start with a slide of my hometown, Mill Valley, with the fog coming in and Mount Tamalpais in the background, and that's really what's going on with this light? Oh, I see. Okay. Well, we have a light show too, and Mount Tamalpais is sort of the touchstone of my art, because I really got started doing landscapes because I wanted to do pictures of Mount Tamalpais and the natural world around where I grew up. And of course, you all live in this world now too. And it is a beautiful world, so it would probably inspire a lot of people to take on the landscape. I've thought a lot about what it is that appeals to me about this landscape, and just recently I came across a phrase that I thought sort of evoked the mystery of whatever it is I'm doing, my interaction with the landscape, and how I go about making a print. And that's this translation of a Chinese description of visual art from the Sung dynasty as silent poetry or wordless poetry. And I love poetry, and I'm often trying to do poetry with words, but over the years I've realized what I really do best is a different kind of poetry, wordless poetry. And it's all about my interaction with this landscape, especially in Northern California. But the landscape forms really bring out sort of a conversation I'm having with a paper, and the intermediary is a pencil or a ballpoint pen, and I'm trying to get the feeling of what it's like to be looking at this beauty of the natural world we live in, and all the little human creations that sparkle around on it too. And at the same time, create some kind of vocabulary that describes it so I can share it with other people. And those are the little marks I make. And of course I'm borrowing a lot of this vocabulary from Japanese prints. But I'm also working with a landscape that's different than 19th century Japan's landscape. And I have to have little marks that represent different kinds of vegetation and landforms and things going on in the world that aren't quite the same as what Hokusai or Hiroshige-sa, who are my great heroes, of course. And so I'm working on a kind of silent poetry that leads to very elaborate prints sometimes. The one you're looking at, this diptych, involved 32 different layers of color, lots of different color blocks with multiple reduction cuts on them. You can see in the clouds, the sky, the bay, the background mountains, at least 3 different reductions on each of the blocks. So it ends up being quite a elaborate process. To get that little glow of the city lights in there and have it come out just a little bit in front of the background mountains like Twin Peaks and all that's behind it, I actually had to do 3 more little layers of color just to get that kind of fawn-colored glow. So this is one that, it doesn't even look like it's got that many color blocks in it, but it does. I love the San Francisco Peninsula, and even though it's covered with buildings, it has an incredible grace from afar. And I've been looking at it all my life, so I have done a lot of pictures of it. And even that giant web of steel that goes across the Golden Gate has somehow, I don't know, in a way it's like Christo's running fence or something. It emphasizes it, so we appreciate it even more, perhaps. Although I love looking at those old Ansel Adams photographs before there was a bridge there. And of course, from the city, you can look back and you can see Mount Tamalpais, which is sort of my touchstone. And this is from right below the Palace of the Legion of Honor at Land's End, where the mile light is glowing out there in the water. And here comes the fog in the gate, viewed from the springtime hillside in Sausalito, over by the Exploratorium in Fort Baker. And fog is, of course, one of those landscape elements that you really can't imagine the Bay Area without. In fact, it's so prevalent and it's so solid in its form, and it always repeats itself, coming in the same places the same way year after year and season after season, that although it's not a solid terra firma, it's a gas, it really is part of the landscape we live in. And this is a very early rendering of the fog coming in over the hills by Sausalito. One of the earliest blocks I did, I think it's from 1973, of Mount Tamalpais. And here's one where adding a couple of layers of color in the early 80s. So this is the beginning of my colored print process. And there's a block that fades from green down into the brownish grass, another block that has the blue water, and then there's the key block, the dark one. And I'll explain to you what the key block is in a minute. And then here's sort of a contemporary print of the fog coming in from up near West Point on Mount Tamalpais. You can see Muir Woods way down there to the right, and the Tiburon Peninsula, Mount Diablo off in the distance, and there's that summertime bank of fog, which if you're real San Franciscans, you probably just cringe looking at that, but there it is. And here's a few views of my favorite site of Mount Tamalpais from Point San Quentin, where it's the end of the mountain, so it's pointier looking. It's not the long, sleeping lady ridge. It's more volcanic looking, even though it's not a volcano, because it rises straight up from the bay in this big point. And I've always appreciated this view since I was a teenager. And some of my first colored prints, like this one with just 3 blocks again, were created to capture it. This one, it was really all about the sky, trying to get the buttermilk sky with the moon glowing in the clouds, but set again in that spot on the San Quentin Peninsula where the mountain really sticks up in a beautiful pointy way. And I've been doing a lot of these prints so long that I have ones from the same place, or almost the same place, that are 30 years apart in time. Here's a view that I did in the early 1970s of Bolinas, from up on Bolinas Ridge. I had a little influence, besides the Japanese, from the psychedelic era poster art of the Fillmore and the Avalon ballrooms in the 60s. I grew up in Marin in San Francisco in that era, and you can see the God's eye up there in the sky. That's from the psychedelic era for sure. And here's another one from just a couple of years ago of almost the same view, where I'm playing with a lot of color and shadow and the patterns in the low tide of the lagoon, and a little bit of colorful psychedelia, I guess, too. And there you can see the city off in the distance with the fog coming in way over the hill on the left side. And this is Tamalpais again. And all these projects came together, these Tamalpais sets of prints of different places, in a book that I did recently with a wonderful poet, who I'm sure many of you know, Gary Snyder, who I've had the good fortune to collaborate with on a couple of books. Here we are signing the Tamalpais Walking Book. And that book really got deep into the history of the walking culture of the mountain and the trails. Here's the Dipsy Trail going by Lone Tree Spring, the most famous trail of Mount Tamalpais, but there's lots of other trails. There's even one, the steep ravine, that has a ladder that goes up over a boulder that you can't get up over any other way. So I had a lot of fun exploring, not just visually, but with my interest in history, this great hiking culture of Mount Tamalpais, and all the little nooks and ecological niches of the mountain, including this amazing grove of ancient redwood trees that somehow amazingly survived, untouched by loggers, when everything else was cut down again and again, right into the early 20th century, so that it could be bought up and preserved by an early Marin County philanthropist, William Kent, who was also a progressive congressman from Marin County in the early 20th century. And he gave it to the people of the United States because he didn't want to see these trees get cut down. What an amazing area we live in, the Bay Area. It's really ground zero for the environmental movement in the United States. And of course he had it named for John Muir. So I got to grow up in this place, and of course that probably had a big influence on my interest in landscape and the natural world. And I had a whole series of little linoleum cut prints in Mount Tamalpais. I was trying to get to 36 because Hokusai had done 36 views of Mount Fuji, and when I was a kid, that's what I really wanted to do. Is I wanted to do views of Mount Tamalpais that looked like Hokusai's views of Mount Fuji. So here's Hokusai's absolute classic red Fuji. And this is what I was trying to do in the 1970s. A little linoleum cut print of Mount Tamalpais with the freeway in the background there. But in the foreground is an old railroad pier built out of wood that I think it looked like a torii gate to me in my childish imagination. So I thought that somehow this little print looked like a Hokusai print. And I finally got enough of them to print a little handmade book in UC Santa Cruz in the early to mid 1970s. And that's how I got to meet Gary Snyder too, is I took a copy of this book up to him and gave it to him up in the mountains behind Nevada City in 1975. And he must have liked it because he told other people about it, and we worked on a number of projects since then. I was also very interested in trying to do color, because after all, the Japanese prints were all about color. And at the time, I only knew how to carve on linoleum. I hadn't studied art. I'd actually never studied art past high school. I studied history in college. And I tried hand rolling and even hand painting some of my little lino cuts, like this one above Pantol and Mount Tamalpais. Blue and yellow, and then it makes green, right? And you can brush it on there. And then I tried cutting out little stencils and fitting them together, and I made a two-color print and hand rolled the colors. So this is Mount Tamalpais from the Mill Valley Marshes, and I got kind of a white on the sky done by hand, and then a little rolled-in yellow mountain and the green strip and all that. And then there's the other block. But I hadn't figured out the Japanese key block technique yet. And then finally I read some little printmaking books about how the Japanese did their key block. And the key block is the first block in a print. In traditional Japanese prints, it's generally very fine black lines, and it's printed onto a piece of paper, which is then turned upside down and glued onto the next colored block, so you can cut right through the paper and carve your colored block, so it's going to line up with the other images in the print. And you do a different key block transfer to as many blocks as you're going to need for colors in the print. But I kind of modified it a little bit because I was using oil-based ink, and I started printing my key blocks onto acetate and turning it over and rubbing it and getting the image transferred onto my other blocks. Here is a 3-color print, one of my first elaborate 3-color prints, and one of the most successful. Today I really like the fact that the rocks don't have shadows underneath them and they look like they're just kind of hanging in the air, but at the time I was a little frustrated by that. But this is a print with a block that fades from the orange down into the yellow-orange of the poppies, and then a light blue block, and then the key block is the dark. And you can see I'm already starting to use the key block for its dark power, rather than just as sort of a template with outlines. And I think that's where my technique really took off and differed a little bit from the traditional Japanese key block technique, because I'm really using the key block still a bit like a black and white wood or lino cut print. So here's a view of from Mount Tamalpais, looking out at San Francisco. Somewhere over there in the distant left corner, you might even see Lone Mountain. Now I think it's just off the picture. But I'm going to show you how I made this print, and it'll give you a little sense of what I do. So here's the sketch, and I always am out there drawing. So it has all the details I need. And by the way, this is a diptych, and you saw the diptych in the show. So this is one side, and I sketched both sides when I was doing the sketch. Down below in the sketch, I got taped in a little view that I did later of some more details of the mountains behind San Francisco. And then from that, I make the key block. This is what's left of the key block just by itself. And you can see it's kind of a black and white outline. Initially, the key block also had some lines showing the horizon of the sea and where the clouds were and a few other things. And then I transfer the key block onto different color blocks. And you can see the color blocks for a different print here with the acetate that I transferred with. And then I carve the color blocks, so different block for each color. And then I put them in my little hand crank printing press, and I set up these gradated rolls on the inking rollers using inks that I mix on a big piece of glass. I also roll, if I'm hand rolling, I roll out on this glass. So this is right next to the press. And I use these oil-based inks. I've learned to use a lot of extender to make them act like watercolors, even though they're oil-based. And I use colored etching inks from France and American-made lithographic and letterpress inks, and see what works. And I experiment a lot with the color. And then when I start the print, I lay down the very lightest color first, usually with some kind of a gradation built into it. And you can watch the print building up here, layer by layer. This doesn't really have all the layers. The numbers will tell you. So far we're up to layer 4. But I've skipped a few in here. There come the vultures. That layer, you see, was just for the vultures, the turkey vultures. And then there's the shadows on the sea and the clouds. And then finally the key block goes over the whole thing. And there were a few more layers to get those hills to go back that I had to do with reduction cuts. And then I got the final print. And here's the other side of the diptych. And you can see this whole piece in the entry hall there in the exhibition. And I've done a lot of these views looking out across the steeply falling California coast down to the sea. In Big Sur, it falls away so steep that you don't even see the horizon. When you're looking out, you really look straight down into the ocean. This is one of the earlier ones I did at Big Sur. And here you can see some of the textures that I developed for my vocabulary of little markings that I use to try to give you a sense of, give the viewer a sense of looking at this California landscape. So there's lupins and poppies, and then there's chaparral, and you can see I've used different markings to give you a sense of distance, the solid dark in the background, and then little markings on on some of the nearer part, and then the chaparral brush and the little oak trees and redwoods. And here's a close-up of another one from that same area in Big Sur. Using color. Color can add a whole other dimension to it. And then a lot of these prints over the years I've collected into these big hand-printed folio books. I did one on the coast. That was an early one, and most of it was still just blue and white. And over the years I've added more colored prints to my coastal repertoire. And I'm just working right now on a new book of the coast of California to be published by Heyday Press that did the two that I did with Gary Snyder, and it'll be sort of like the third in a series. Here's a pretty recent one of Muir Beach in the winter when the rain clouds are hanging out. And I also like to do a lot of night scenes. And of course, my favorite Shinhanga, that's the new woodcut period of the 1920s and 30s in Japan, is Hasui, who did those incredible nighttime scenes, especially along the Sumida River. And I have a lot of nighttime scenes. I'm just finishing a print right now of a nighttime scene up in the really high Sierra. And from that High Sierra book that I did, I got another collaborative work with Gary Snyder. In fact, it was the first one we really collaborated on. And it was first a hand-printed book that I finished after 5 years of work. This is when I finally quit my day job teaching at SF State and started doing art full-time in the late 1990s to finish this book up. And right on the opening page is this print of Matterhorn Peak, which is back there in the distance on the left, which Gary sort of famously climbed, and it's recounted in a book called Dharma Bums by Jack Kerouac. And Evolution Valley is probably the most spectacular place in the High Sierra, and it's sort of the centerpiece print of that book. But there's a lot of other High Sierra views. This is Lake Tahoe from Desolation Wilderness, and a more recent one of Davis Lakes. And the Sierras allowed me to get into doing snow scenes too, since we don't have snow down in the Bay Area. And snow scenes, of course, just cry out for a woodblock print. They have so much graphic character that looks really great with just a few layers of color. Lake Tenaya in Yosemite area, Yosemite Valley, which just doesn't need any color at all. And in the winter with the snow, it really is just a almost monochromatic world. But I threw in this yellow sunset sky to give it a little more intensity. Half Dome from Glacier Point, a 12-mile ski to get to this view. And one of my favorites that just came from something I was drawing when I was standing up on my skis in Tuolumne Meadows. We used to go up to Tuolumne Meadows on ski trips. And then out in the Wallace Lakes Basin under Mount Whitney in the winter with our snow camping tent. And of course this print owes a lot to Hiroshige. So this is Hiroshige's snow camping expedition. And the printmaker in me is very proud of how I've got snowflakes breaking 3 different color blocks from the sky into the mountain and right through the key block too, and getting it all to line up. That's a big deal to get it all to line up. Most recently, I'm really interested in trees. The trees of California are just extraordinary. Like almost no other place in the world, we have the biggest, we have the oldest, and we have, in a subjective way, the most beautiful. Especially the foxtail pines that live up in the really high Sierras. And these ones are really glowing in a shaft of sunlight just before a big thunderstorm comes crashing in here. In fact, the sketchbook that I have is spattered with raindrops. And I'm up there sketching every year in the High Sierra. I'm going up again in a couple of weeks on a big backpack trip. And it's from these sketches that my prints come. These are some foxtail pines up around Mitre Basin. This is the sketch for that fin dome print, which you can see in the show. And this is the sketch for a print of twin lodgepole pines that I started the block for it when there was that Japanesque exhibit at the Legion of Honor a couple of years ago, because I wanted to do something that looked particularly what Americans think of as a Japanese print, how it should look. And let me just close by showing you a little bit how this print worked, and then if you have some questions about technique and stuff. So here I am carving away on the second rendition of a color block for that print. Here is the key block ready to be inked for the first time, and that's when the key block is most beautiful, because the wood is nice and white, and I haven't cleaned the block yet and gotten black all into the white, so the black is only showing up where the ink is. So I was smart enough to take a picture, which I rarely do, with my cheap little digital camera, when it had its first little layer of black ink on it. And this is the transfer of the key block onto some color blocks so that I can carve them so they're going to register. This is the yellow block. And then that's what the print looked like, the twin pines. And Gary Snyder and I were on a trip that Armando remembers, that my friend is sitting here who organized that trip, up in the Sierras when we came across these trees when we were out hiking. And he said they reminded him of a Japanese no play from the 12th century that was about an old man and an old woman that had taken the form of these twin pines. One of the lines in there is still read at Japanese weddings, and it translates something like, "Happy are the pines born in the same era and growing old together." And here they are, growing old together. Thank you. If anybody has any questions about how I do any of this, I know that there's some students here that came because I think their teachers asked them to come, but if you're actually interested in any of the stuff that I didn't go over, feel free. Yeah.
Maybe a couple questions. With your more recent work, do you ever do color lino cuts, or it's all wood cuts? I know you said earlier you did lino cuts.
Yeah, I gradually moved from doing lino cuts to doing wood cuts. Along the way, I still used and sometimes still use lino for the key block because it's going to be inked with this black letterpress ink that it takes very nicely. It looks good.
Okay.
And then I use wood for the color blocks always because it takes that color so much better. And you can see the wood grain. But often I now use wood for the key block too, because there's something about the wood that it just imparts its own nature. Like the twin pines I did with a wood key block, because it kind of goes along with the tree form. But it's almost it's a decision about how much. If I'm going to use a huge amount of black, like in some of those night scenes, I still use linoleum because the linoleum, if you want just a uniform, rich black with that tacky letterpress ink, it works better. It actually prints it just as a solid black more strongly.
One follow-up question. With your woodcut, one often sees more grain on the plank side of the wood, but you don't see too much grain. It's not noticeable in your prints. How do you, maybe you just have to look really closely, but you seem to kind of avoid getting that woodcut grain.
Yeah, I'm using it as a printing surface, but I do pick pieces that the grain works with, say the sky or something.
Yeah.
So I've thought about it, but it doesn't always take the ink in a way that makes the grain come out. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. It just depends on the piece of wood and the texture and I guess how much it absorbs of the ink and things like that. So I play around. Sometimes I find one piece that's better than another and I'll switch to that one.
Oh, interesting. Thank you.
But the Japanese didn't try to use the wood grain usually. More contemporary people have, and by contemporary I mean 20th century. But the tradition was it was a printing surface. Also using water-based ink and rub by hand, the way the Japanese did it, it does accentuate the wood grain more, especially over time, because you're really rubbing away, almost scrubbing it, and the brushes that put on the ink too. Everything is wet. The paper's wet. The block is wet. The traditional Japanese way of printing was a very labor-intensive, super skilled process, and it was not done by the artist. In fact, the artist almost never carved the blocks either. The artist was the artist, and the woodblock prints were a reproduction technique. And often the publisher, for Hokusai and Hiroshige, I've read in books, that the publisher made a lot of the decisions about the color even. So I'm trying to do it all myself, and my little helper is this printing press. And the fact that I use the printing press and the rubber rollers, I have to use oil-based ink. So that's why I call it faux ukiyo-e, because I'm doing a faux sort of process, trying to make them look like ukiyo-e haga. Yeah?
Do you ever do lithographs?
I've never done any other printmaking technique. No. I've only done this one because I never went to art school. I would have probably not gotten into this if I'd gone to art school because I would have been so taken by other medium. Like I probably would have loved dry point etching, you know.
I saw in your sketches that you took general notes about color, like blue, green, or orange, just
Yeah.
written out. But do you ever take photographs of the different areas to remember the colors, or?
You know, I've learned not to even take a camera with me, because if I do, I'll click it and I'll go, okay, I got it, and then I'll keep going. So you know, I work from sketches. I have to force myself to not, you know, rely on a camera, so I don't even take one. So it's just not an issue. I had some photographs somebody else took that are with one of my sketches out in the case in the entryway that I put on there because it was nice to have a photograph that showed the place. But I didn't actually, and you can tell when you look at the print, invent the colors from looking at that photograph. And photographs often, you know, then that's the color that the camera and the film and whatever color technique the film is based on creates. It's not a particularly good, you know, mnemonic device for color, I don't think. I think your brain is better, you know, to kind of hold your idea of what you saw there, the feeling of it. Anybody else? Yeah.
Does the wood block get better the more times you use it? Like, does it change, evolve, or anything?
Well, yeah, it's hard to say. It does change. It does wear out after a while from the pressure of the press. Because what I use is a lindenwood, a shina, Japanese lindenwood, made into plywood blocks just for block printing. But I often find it's kind of nicer after I've cleaned it a couple of times and a little more wood grain shows, and it takes the ink a little differently than right at the beginning. So yeah, it does develop and change. And if you're getting into printmaking, it's really great to experiment a lot. You know, I've experimented through doing it so much, so I have kind of a sense of where it's going. But you know, it's a great thing to experiment with different kinds of woods and see what they do.
What's a typical print run? How many prints?
Oh, these days I do about 175 average. I run 180 or 185 good sheets of paper through the handmade Japanese paper that I use, the Torinoko. And I used to do 108, and before that I did really small editions, like 50 or 30, and I would have stacks of them sitting around for years and years, but that was a long time ago. Now I do kind of the reasonable limit of what I can do, because if it's a successful print, people want it, and sometimes the editions disappear in a year or less. Like those Twin Pines just ran away out of my studio in that Bolinas Ridge sunset print. You know, I mean, some of them just really disappeared quick. And then if I don't, they're all multi-block reduction cuts, so I can't go do them ever again. And so if I don't do as many as I can, then I won't have any more of them to send out there into the world, and that's also how I make my living. So 175, that's a good number. Yeah. You can't crank your press more than about 200 times in a day. So to get the registration and everything right, you have to crank it about 200 times to get 175 good prints. And that's layer by layer, day by day, for weeks sometimes. They do these big multicolored prints. Anyone else? Any other questions?
So you make, like you print one layer of color 108 times one day, in one day?
Yeah.
That
Well, I have a stack of 180 sheets of paper, and I feed them all through. Yeah.
Okay.
And a lot of times I'm doing little hand things each time to adjust the color. And so consequently, there's a real variation in that. On the big multicolored prints, there's a lot of variation in how they look like, because I'm using semi-transparent ink, and it goes over sometimes 3 or 4 different layers. Whatever the base layer or intervening layers, whatever difference there was, and because I keep adding color, and sometimes I remix it, and sometimes I purposely change it because I think it'll look better with something else. So throughout the edition, there's a lot of variation in color. So it's, you know, it's not a very uniform edition oftentimes, which, you know, people I think like. They like picking out ones that they like. I certainly have fun doing it that way. Well, thank you very much, and I'll be around for a few minutes if you want to ask me anything more, you know, without the whole public listening to your question. Thanks.